Okay, so we are done with the REST integration part, also with the integration hub. So now let's see what are the different functionalities that we are going to have in our application and what are the different logics that we are going to use in order to create them. Okay, the first one is get all Zoom meetings. Okay, so you can see down below here all the different steps that we have to go through in order to build this solution, let's say. And it is pretty much the same thing that we have done before for the time zone table. So but we have some additional step here. So the first one is creating a REST action, which is actually going to send a request to the API to get all Zoom meetings. Then we will call this action from a data source, and once we have the data, we're going to put it in a staging table, then transform it. Okay, we will also have a schedule import, and we will see right in a moment how we are in detail everything that I have explained, and also how schedule import is going to be useful for us. The second functionality is going to be create a meeting from ServiceNow in Zoom. So for that, whenever you create a record in the meeting table, we can trigger a flow, and that flow contain a meeting create a meeting action, so which is actually going to send a request uh, to the API and create a meeting. And not only that, once we create our meeting, we are going to run a script which is actually going to call the schedule import. Okay, which is actually going to trigger the entire process for get all Zoom meetings. This is how basically we update our record. We are not just creating a meeting in Zoom, but we also update our record. So when you create a meeting in ServiceNow, so it creates a meeting over there, but also you get the meeting URL, the UUID, and other information. So the next thing is how do we delete our meeting event? So we are going to use a UI action, and our UI action will have a server code. Okay, and we do the same thing for recreating a meeting from ServiceNow using a UI action, and our UI action will have a server code. For updating a meeting is we are going to, so whenever a record is getting updated in the meeting table, we can trigger a flow. Okay, we use flow designer here, and in our flow we're going to have update meeting action, basically a REST request, which is actually going to update the meeting. So this is the kind of big picture of the application, and it is important to have such a view before you get started with the application. Okay, so let's now see in details how do we do to get all Zoom meetings. Okay, so in order to get all Zoom meetings, the first thing that we are going to do is to create a REST action, which is actually going to send a request to Zoom API and get a response, and our response will contain all our Zoom meetings. So this is quite easy and fast to do, so you will have just a part of video just after where you can see how quickly we can create this. But now what we are going to focus on is the script that we are going to write in our data source, which is actually going to call this flow designer action and parse the response body and put the data into our staging table. So let's study first the response body. So this is what we get from flow designer. Okay, you can see here there is a meetings array, and inside our array we have multiple objects, and each object contains a meeting information. So we have the ID, host ID, topic, start date, time, duration, time zone, and so on. If you want to access the information, for example, if you want the ID value, you will have to parse the response. Okay, so we have to use the parse method. So here we have a code. I have a local variable for response body equal to json.parse, and in between brackets I give the response body. So in this way we can parse it, and the way we can access is you have another piece of code here which can get the ID value. So we do response body dot meetings, and we specify which object in our meeting array that we want to take the data, and then we specify what we want exactly. So we can say ID or topic or duration. So this is how we actually manipulate let's say the response body, how we can use it to get the data. So this is important to understand before we go into the before we see the entire script that we are going to write for our data source. So this is the entire script for our data source, and the first part of it is we are calling the flow designer action. Okay, so we are using a flow API to do this, and you can get this code from flow designer itself. Once you create the action, you have a code snippet. If you click on that, you have the server code which you can use to call the flow designer action. So that's the first part. We call it, then we get the uh, output, and our output, it's going to be a response body. Okay, this is how we build our action. And we saw just before how we parse our response body, so we do exactly the same thing here. So var response body equal to JSON parse, and inside our brackets we have the response body. So once we are done with this part, we can start to uh, go and get the meeting details. Okay, so we are going to first run a loop. Okay, so we can know the length of our meeting array. Okay, so we can write response body dot meetings dot length. We will know what is the length of this array, and we can run a loop in the meeting array. And for each iteration, we can create a map object which will contain the meeting details. So the map object, for example, here we have u underscore UUID and the value, u underscore ID and the value, u underscore host underscore ID and the value of the host ID. So this is how we build also the object, and each time we create a map object, okay, we also insert that map object in the staging table. Okay, so the way we do it is import set table dot insert, and we have as input here the map object. Okay, so you have the product documentation which will explain you what are the other methods that we can use with the import set. So we have some other methods like adding columns. uh, so this is how we do to get the data. In summary, we call the flow designer action with the code, then we get the response, we pass the response, we run a loop inside our response, specifically in the meeting array, and for each meeting we are creating an object, a map object that we insert, that we use and insert in our staging table. So just keep watching the video, and create the action, and use the following script to load the data into your staging table, and you will have an import set.